Hello and welcome to the Media Freedom Rapid Response Interviews. Today we will be discussing SLAPs, and we are pleased to be joined by the ECPMF Senior Legal Advisor Flutura Kusari as we explore the path towards the implementation of SLAP standards across Europe. We will begin with a brief overview of the key instruments that were adopted earlier this year, followed by a closer look at the current landscape. Have member states started transposing and implementing these standards, and what does a successful transposition look like? Additionally, we will discuss the crucial need to build capacities of the judiciary and legal professionals across Europe to effectively combat SLAPs. Finally, we will conclude with a few remarks on the upcoming anti-SLAP conference. Flutura, welcome. In April 2024, the European Union passed a directive and the Council of Europe adopted a recommendation against SLAPs. Could you please explain the difference between these two instruments, especially for our wider audience who are not necessarily lawyers?
Yes, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to speak about this topic. So basically, after years of advocacy, mainly by the Coalition Against SLAPs in Europe, which started after Daphne Caruana Galizia was assassinated in April this year, we had two instruments, one from the EU, which is the directive, and the recommendation from the Council of Europe. These instruments, first and foremost, provide for procedural safeguards and remedies to protect journalists. They have a range of procedural safeguards and remedies, but let me just mention one, which is the most important one. They provide for the possibility of courts to early dismiss cases. What does this mean in practice? Let's say if a journalist publishes an article, and then somebody feels like he or she has been damaged, their reputation has been damaged, then they can sue the journalist. And on one hand, these instruments provide for the right to access justice, which means anyone can file a lawsuit, a claim. But at the same time, if that is clearly a SLAP, unfounded, the purpose is to intimidate the journalist, then courts should be able to early dismiss this case, so as quickly as possible. And as a result of that, you have a very good balancing test between access to justice and at the same time the journalist not suffering or having consequences because of SLAPs. There is a big difference, in fact, among these two instruments, the directive and the recommendation. The directive focuses only on cross-border SLAPs and only in civil claims. Again, for those who are not lawyers, what does this mean in practice? If a journalist writes an article in Germany and publishes in Germany, he or she can be sued in UK. And the directive offers protection only for these cross-border SLAPs. This is not sufficient because based on the research of case, only 10% of cases that were documented by case are cross-border, which means 90% of cases are not basically dealt based on these instruments. Also, if we take the example of Daphne, she would not be protected if we only have the directive. That's why the Council of Europe came up with another instrument, which is the recommendation, and which is very wide in scope. It covers all types of SLAPs, domestic and cross-border SLAPs, and also all types of claims, meaning administrative, civil, and criminal cases. And the last thing that I would say in terms of content of these two instruments, when we were discussing, as you know, I was a member of both expert committees in these institutions. When we were discussing these instruments at national level with judges, etc., the main question was, how will judges identify SLAPs? And recommendation has a very good answer. It provides a list of indicators which should be used by judges to identify SLAPs. These are indicators, questions that should be asked by judges and should be provided answers in their analysis, and that would help identify whether a case is a SLAP or not.
Thank you, Flutura. And now that we have these international legal instruments to protect journalists and activists, what should happen next to ensure this protection becomes tangible and a reality for journalists?
So the European instruments means that at European level, some standards are created. So these two instruments tell their member states, EU and Council of Europe member states, look, you need to address SLAPs, and these are the minimum standards. So the next stage now is for member states to transpose the directive, which is an obligation, and to implement the recommendation, which is a soft law. That means that practically member states, governments and parliaments across Europe would have to pass legislation, which can be amendment of existing legislation. It can be a standalone law, for example, law on anti-SLAPP in a certain member state, or it can be a new section on different pieces of legislation. Let's take civil procedural law, which is the most important one. And only when we have the transposition and implementation at national level, then this protection provided by these instruments is tangible for journalists and activists.
And what should member states do to successfully transpose both the directive and the recommendation?
Now, the case does a lot of legal work, the Coalition Against SLAPPs in Europe, and they have provided some principles that are important and hopefully guiding principles for member states for successful transposition. And 3 principles have been recommended. First and foremost is that SLAPPs are disposed as quickly as possible in court. So when these instruments are transposed at national level, the legislation should equip judges with legal powers that these cases are disposed as quickly as possible. The second principle is that costs for SLAPP targets are kept to an absolute minimum, and also any harm caused is fully compensated. And the third principle is that costs for SLAPP filers, those who file SLAPPs, are sufficiently high so that SLAPPs are deterred. And if member states, parliaments and governments across Europe follow these principles, then the likeliness that they have a successful transposition is quite high.
And following up, what is the role of the Coalition Against SLAPPs in Europe now, knowing that you were very active as a coalition in pushing for legislation at the European level?
The case continues to work very intensively, and now the work is focused mainly on advocacy at national level. We have created national civil society working groups consisting of experts, civil society activists, journalists, former judges, and they are pushing their own governments basically to come up with legislation. The case does also a lot of legal work. I mentioned the principles earlier. There is a legal ethical guideline for lawyers. There is another resource on how to protect a SLAPP from SLAPPs, or what to do when they face SLAPPs. So these resources are very useful at national level, which can be used not only by civil society, but also by governments and parliaments, provided that they are open to collaboration with civil society. And unfortunately, this is not always the case.
And could you please also elaborate a bit on the need to build the capacities of the judges and other legal professionals to handle SLAPP cases?
So these instruments are new, and for them to be successfully implemented and used at national level, we really need judges, lawyers, police officers, prosecutors, and other professionals to be informed and familiarized with these instruments. That's why capacity building is extremely important. The Council of Europe, and I'm working together with Peter Norlander, is developing a European anti-SLAPP curricula, which aims to be used as a resource for member states to train judges, lawyers, prosecutors, and other legal professionals. The European anti-SLAPP curricula will be launched in the conference on 14th of November, and hopefully it will be used by member states of Council of Europe in the future.
Thank you so much, Flutura. And finally, there is an event that we are all impatiently waiting for. We have an upcoming anti-SLAPP conference. Could you share more information on this conference with our audience as well?
Yes, so we have the second European Anti-SLAPP Conference. It will take place on 14th of November. It's organized by CASE ECPMF in collaboration with Council of Europe. And I would like to say that we're extremely thankful to Council of Europe for the support and for being a partner in the conference. We are bringing more than 20 speakers and moderators who will share information on SLAPs. The key focus will be the initiatives on transposition and implementation of standards. So we will highlight all those member states who have taken concrete steps to transpose the standards, and we will also highlight the amazing work of civil society and other European institutions, including Council of Europe. We will bring together around 300 people. There is still time to register. The agenda, the impressive agenda, is online. So I invite everyone who is watching this interview to attend the conference if they have the possibility. They can do so by registering and by coming to Strasbourg.
Thank you so much, Flutura, and we are looking forward to the conference in Strasbourg. And thank you also for your valuable work in the field of SLAPs and legal support for journalists and for the field of media freedom. And we would like to also extend our thanks to our viewers who joined this interview.